Hello and welcome. My name is Christy Don. Oh, hi to Zoom folks too. I hope I'm waving to you and don't have my back to you. I think. Am I waving? Good. Okay, that's good. I am program and volunteer coordinator with Care Partners of Cook County, and we're just so delighted to have you all here. This is part of our Lunch and Learn series. It happens typically on the fourth Wednesday of each month from noon to 1 here at Cook County Higher Education. We're excited to be partnering with them and with a lot of great organizations like the Alzheimer's Association to bring topics that are related to aging and aging well in our community. So I just ran around and put this little handout on your desks and let you know about our next Lunch and Learn, which will be happening May 26th. We're going to talk about senior health and fitness with an emphasis on the fitness. We're going to be blessed with Nancy's. So we have Nancy Jaguar, Nancy Starr, and Nancy Koloski, who will all help us know about some of the amazing fitness activities that are available here. They all are typically associated, well, Nancy Koloski with Bone Builders, and the other Nancy's with yoga, one at the Y and one at the Hub. We'll also have a list of fun things that we can all do to stay fit and active. I am just learning now that we got like a bunch of dance classes that are going on around here, and there's all sorts of cool things that we can do to stay healthy. So that's next time. And thanks to our wonderful friends at Caldwell Banker North Shore, the first 20 people who sign up online or who sign up for the in-person class will be able to receive a free lunch from our friends at Subway. So that's exciting. Coming up, we're going to, on June 28th, talk about adult protective services in Cook County, some of the myths and some of the facts about what happens when calls are made, and learn a little bit more about those great folks there who do that good work. July 27th, we'll talk a little bit. Our doulas will help us think about how to tell our stories, how to leave a legacy in a way that maybe isn't just writing a story down, but to think about some creative ways that we can share what's important with us, to us, with the people who are important to us. And then August 23rd, we hope to have someone from Grand Portage here to help us think about different cultural perspectives on aging. So excited for all of those. Memory Cafe is always the third Thursdays. Death Cafe, our doulas, do that on the fourth Thursdays of the month. And then coming up in September, we've got an Aging with Gusto series. Read more about that, as well as Walk to End Alzheimer's. So we are busy and we hope that you will be too. So we are very, very happy to welcome Jenna Pogorels. Yes, from the Alzheimer's Association. And she has presented for us in the past, and we're delighted that she is with us again. If you want information about Alzheimer's, about caregiving for Alzheimer's, I can't say enough about all the wonderful resources that the Alzheimer's Association has. So I'm not going to take up any more time and hand it over to Jenna. So thank you again for coming.
Thanks so much, Christy. It's so nice to see a lot of familiar faces, so thanks for being here today, and I'm very excited. This is a really fun class, but it's different than our normal Alzheimer's Association classes in that if you're hoping to get a lot of nitty-gritty, what is Alzheimer's, what is dementia, you're not going to get that today, but I welcome the questions because I would love to talk about dementia education. This class is really focused on some of those top 3 things that we hear from families that are really hard to talk about, those really difficult conversations to have. And a lot of this, if you're also looking for like the magic answer of how to get your family member to the doctor or how to get those keys away from someone who may not be driving, again, it's a very different perspective for every single person. So we're just going to go over some tips and strategies today. But take that away with you and take it back to your families, take it back to your people you might work with or in your own situations. And just know that every situation is different. And so we're going to talk some generalities, but I welcome conversation about what has worked or what has been challenging in your own situations. Because I think more than me sharing information, sharing each other's information and sharing each other's experiences is much more valuable. So I encourage you that if you have an experience or a question, I guarantee someone else has that same question. Please feel free to raise that. I know I left packets on everybody's spot at the table, but we have some folks that aren't at the tables. I do have extras, so I will give it to you afterwards. Or I have some up here, Christy, if you want to take them, you are welcome to. I will just give you all of my extras right now. These are 2 packets that are together already. And then these are. And then I also brought with me, sorry for these new folks that I'm not trying to ignore you. I also brought some resources with me that are over on that table. So afterwards, when we've got more space and things, I encourage you to go over and just grab whatever makes sense to you and what may be helpful, including 3 documents that I printed out. I didn't want to overload y'all with paper on your table. So, and not everyone might need it, but I'm going to refer to these 3 during the session today. One of them is communicating with your healthcare team. Some really great information there. One is around preparing for your doctor's visit. So some questions to think about, what to bring to that initial doctor's visit or to subsequent doctor visits. And the last one is around driving information in a contract, which we'll talk about during the session, but that is all sitting over there that you are able to pick up after. All right, I am going to jump in here. So again, this class really goes over one of those 3 top conversations that are really difficult to have. They're very emotionally charging conversations and challenging conversations. So getting someone to the doctor, I'm sure we may have experienced having challenges getting someone to the doctor if we have concerns initially, but also someone who's maybe more progressed and we need to get them in for a checkup. That sometimes is challenging too. So there's some tricks and tools that we'll talk about today. I hesitate to say too that this gears more onto someone in the earlier stages. So someone who may have some of those cognitive skills to help make some decision making, things like that. We really focus on early detection at the Alzheimer's Association. So we really want folks who are diagnosed early to be prepared as to what's the next steps, what should I be looking at? And so these are 3 topics we think you should be focusing on when you're having concerns or having family member concerns. Not necessarily diagnosed, but just as we're aging. If you are caring for someone or know someone into the middle or later stages, some of this information is going to be like, that's not going to work with them. That's because they're at a different stage. So we need to talk about what that might mean. So that's why I say this is geared a little bit more towards those earlier stages, just so you're all aware of that. So thinking about the doctor, deciding, again, that big piece of independence, the driving piece, and then making some legal and financial plans to cover future needs. I always emphasize that I am not a financial planner and I'm not an elder law attorney, so I won't be taking current questions on situations. I refer to our lovely county social workers if you need support, elder law attorneys if you need support in that, financial advisors. So we know we've got some great folks in the community that can help with those resources. So we're going to talk a little bit on how to have tips around breaking the ice, how to have those conversations, help you plan ahead and build a care team. That's really important to have a care team. You are very fortunate to have care partners in the county in the area and just others that are able to be a part of that care team with you. There's some videos implanted through here that we'll talk about. You'll hear some folks who are dealing with some of those issues. And then I'll talk a little bit about what resources we have at the association as well. So when we think about being a caregiver, not everyone always identifies as a caregiver, even if you're doing some of those jobs as a caregiver. So we really want to think about how are we addressing the concerns and what's holding us back from having these conversations? So some of these things that we often hear on our helpline or with our care consultants is, my sister lives close by, so she's going to take care of things. I'm not going to worry about the planning of mom or dad at this point. Or we're just starting to notice the changes. We'll wait a little bit until we notice some more changes. And I'm here to tell you now, the more proactive you are in the beginning, the better chances for just a better quality life for someone with dementia and their care partners and other family members involved. So these are some of the things that we hear throughout the portions of working with families around some of the barriers of having and starting these conversations. Would anybody add to that? What's pulled back from people you work with or from yourselves in your current situations from having kind of those conversations?
I can't speak to my husband about it because he gets so frustrated and he gets very, very angry.
Yeah,
Very angry.
yeah. So some of those just communication tips and things that change when someone may be impacted by cognitive impairments.
I think fear
Fear.
of thinking there's something wrong, denial.
Yep, absolutely. There's a lot of fear, stigma, denial around having these conversations. And I think what's important to note about that is that some of these things, we should be talking about whether or not dementia is in the picture or not. So thinking about legal and financial planning should just be something we're thinking about as we age naturally. So think about that. If going to the doctor for our regular tune-ups. We take our cars in for regular tune-ups, we should be taking our bodies in for regular tune-ups. So again, some of these conversations can be directed, early on in terms of just general overall aging health. So I think I've belabored this already, but the sooner the better. Don't wait for a crisis. We don't want to have a crisis moment happen where someone is ill or falls or of the millions of things that could possibly happen. We want to make sure that these conversations are happening the soonest that they can. Also, if we're dealing with someone with dementia, we do know that that's a progressive condition. So we do know that their judgment skills and their cognition to be able to make solid judgment decisions is going to decline. So we want to catch that decision, and we want them to be a part of that decision as early on because this is their life. So we want to make sure that their wishes are being met financially and legally, and we want to make sure that they are aware that their wishes when it comes to driving and their independence and their activities, that they are aware of that and that they are bringing that to the table as their plan and not just a family's plan or a caregiver's plan. So we always talk about having a plan to have a finessed conversation. So what does that mean to have the finessed conversation? So we want people to be prepared for really having that open, honest conversation about these three topics. We also want to have them be noticing any changes that could be potentially popping up and really reflecting on the emotions and the feelings of the person involved. Because these, again, are very emotionally charged topics. So we want to make sure that those feelings are brought up. So one of the ways we talk about finessing that conversation a little bit is asking the person who we might have some concerns about if he or she would like to know if if we've noticed any changes about them. Some people don't want to know. They want to be in that denial spot, and that's an active human condition that's our first defense mechanism for us as humans, is to go into that denial spot. So it's very normal for folks to do that. And it's not saying that it's a bad thing, it's a protective measure for them. It's a protective measure for ourselves. So if they say yes, then we can start having those conversations. Yes, I want to know if you're seeing changes. I want to be a part of that. If they say no, maybe we focus on why they don't want to be a part of those changes versus just jumping into, well, I've seen this and this and this and this. So it feels like kind of a gang up or a accusatory statements. So we want to focus on maybe the fear behind it, some of the stigma behind it. So those are the kinds of things we talk about when we say about finessing a conversation. I've shared with you some of the tools that we use, but it's always really helpful to have notes prepared, especially when going to the doctor, about what those changes are that you've seen. So that's why I brought that one sheet with me. And for those in Zoom land, I'd be happy to send them to Christine or Kelsey, and we can get them out to you as well. But one of them is called Preparing for Your Doctor's Visits. And it is kind of that checklist of what those things we've seen in our changes we've seen, things like that. So take notes about what you've seen when. A lot of times when you go to doctors or when we're talking about even financial, legal planning, people want to have that, the professionals who want to have when it's happening, when to see a behavior around a pattern per se of some of the behavioral changes or some of those changes that we might see cognitively. So start taking some notes that you're noticing for folks or in yourself. I always encourage, especially with adult children, I speak with a lot of adult children who are quite afraid to talk to their parents about this. And I think part of that is the rule, right? As adult children, we've always taken wisdom and follow directions from our parents. And so this is kind of a role reversal in the sense that we're starting to now think about their health and think about their well-being. And so that role reversal, even as adults, can be really challenging. And so I always encourage people to, especially if they're in a sibling group, to just start practicing with each other about how we want to have these conversations. Now, my parents will say they never have a favorite child, but I know there is a favorite child when it comes to this conversation. So and it was me because I work in the field, and so it was easier for me to finesse this conversation with my own family. Whereas my brother is very task oriented, and so I said, here, you get the task part, I get to have the conversation, and then we kind of came together, but he and I practiced that and then we ragged on our parents. And so sometimes it's just taking that time to practice it out. If it's a friend situation or a care partner situation or a spousal situation, is there another group, a support group, or something that you can have these practice conversations with? Because the more we practice and the more we feel comfortable with what we're talking about, the better the conversation will be. Most importantly, especially for someone with dementia, is to have this conversation in a comfortable end spot. So when both are relaxed, both are comfortable, a good time of day. For some folks with dementia, sometimes the mornings tend to be a bit better for their clarity and for their cognition, and they get a bit more tired towards the end of the day. We might be experiencing some early sundowners, things like that. So think about when they're most relaxed and having this conversation. Any questions on that so far? I know I'm kind of breezing through it quickly too, because I want to leave some time for discussion.
One quick question.
Yeah.
What exactly would you consider a sundowner?
So yeah, sundowning is a condition where individuals with dementia typically experience some higher rates of agitation, anxiety, nervousness in those later evening or early evening hours, later afternoon hours. Typically we see it as the sun sets. Some of that is due to the changes in just the day. So we're tired. I don't know about you all, but my brain is like pretty done around 4 because I'm a very morning person and my brain goes in the morning and then I shut down. So some of it is that natural cycle for individuals. And then some of it is also just there's that lapse in time and the time changes and the difference in outside of just the darkening that happens, things like that. So there's still a couple of thoughts in there, but that's kind of the overall experience of sundowning. Yeah. All right. Sorry.
As far as sundowning, like closing the curtains before like the sun starts to actually change can help some people too.
Really?
Not all, but some, especially in the early stages. So there's those little things that kind of help ease
Thank you.
into that a little bit.
No, thank you.
Could also, we always encourage people to find like what they really enjoy, pleasurable activity, and start that before we might see some of those things.
Kind of distract them.
Yeah, to help distract during that part, but just kind of knowing the lighting situation can really be a big piece of that sundowning piece too. Yeah, thank you for that. So again, we talked a little bit about this already. So fear, anger, stigma can also be a barrier to going into the doctor. And this will be kind of the first section that we talk about the challenges of getting into the doctor for medical support, for health, for checkups, things like that. So this is, again, we kind of covered this already a little bit. So I'm going to let Donna share a little bit about her family situation and how it was important for them.
Get a loved one to the doctor. I think you just need to be candid and honest of what are you trying to do? We're trying to understand what I think it's
Here, I'll stop it. Maybe we can figure this out real quick. Can't have a virtual without technical issues of some sort. It's probably on my end, so. It's usually on mine. All right, let's try this again. Thank you.
I think you have to be honest. I think that's the important thing with it. To get a loved one to the doctor, I think you just need to be candid and honest of what are you trying to do. We're trying to understand what we're up against. It's just so important to do that because you can't battle something that you don't know what you're battling. Again, it may not have been Alzheimer's, it could have been depression, it could have been so many other things. And guess what? There's other things you can do to take care of those issues as well. But that's what you need to be able to do. You know, you can't ignore something, it's not going to go away.
So one of those tips that we talk about early on about having this conversation of going to the doctor and getting to the doctor is using words that are comfortable for the person. Some of you may be living or working with someone who is very uncomfortable with the word Alzheimer's, dementia. I don't have Alzheimer's. I don't have dementia. Part of that is the denial piece, and part of that may be an insight piece into understanding that there is a disease process happening too. So starting to think about words that would not signify going to the doctor for those reasons, but perhaps saying something like, you mentioned that you were forgetting to take your meds every day. How about we go to the doctor and see if there's something we can do to figure out your med situation? So we're focusing on meds right there, right? Or how about we figure out your annual wellness visits coming up? As of 2000 something, I can't remember off the top of my head, Medicare has been covering free annual wellness visits every year. And during those, they do cognitive testing, or they should be doing some cognitive testing. Some of you on Medicare may have gone through those testing, which is drawing the clock usually, remembering 3 words. So those kinds of things, we can avoid the words Alzheimer's or dementia and get them on a different reason there. Some of the folks that I work with often will use that if they're on other prescriptions for their blood pressure or diabetes, that the insurance is requiring that we get into the doctor because of for your refill. On the back end, it might not be that really the reason, but that's the reason that we're going to tell that person. So thinking about what some of those other things are, I know one of the most challenging gentlemen that I had to get to the doctor with, he and his family and I were brainstorming for a long time. And then finally, they were quite happy about this. And I was like, well, he fell and hurt his ankle and he was having a hard time walking. So it took for him to fall and hurt his ankle to get him to the doctor. But for him, that was like, in his family, that was the precipice of his whole planning for their family, was that visit. So again, if you are a family member, not the patient, a spouse, you may not be able to get their health information due to HIPAA. I think we all probably know this, unless the patient themselves signs off on their HIPAA form, the privacy notices. However, you are available to give the doctor information. So you can use that sheet that I provided to write down those changes. You can write a note to the doctor for them to see. They just may not be able to give information back to you about treatment or anything like that. But you can give them information, and this would be an opportune time if they're going in for another visit to kind of do that and share that information with them. We always talk about, especially for someone that may be going into those middle to later stages of dementia, that to pair this with an enjoyable outing. So we're going to go to the doctors and then we're going to go to lunch. We're going to do this and then we're going to go to the park. We're going to do this and then we're going to go see our friend Sam. So to make sure that it's not just one visit, it's not a stressful time for them, that we keep it very simple and that there's some sort of enjoyable outing planned with that. I just mentioned this, but inviting family members to connect. So one thing that a lot of families, especially with big sibling groups or other people around there, is if they're not going to the doctor with that person, again, communicating with the doctor prior to that. And hopefully, and one of the challenges is around communication with our healthcare providers, which is why I brought that sheet with us, because it has some really great ideas around how to have those really great conversations and how to prepare those conversations with healthcare providers. And if you all have examples of how it's worked for your families, please share them, because I think that can really help other individuals that are in that situation of how communication, because a lot of times the pitfalls are the miscommunications between the providers and the family. So this is a really great opportunity to just share those skills. And then if still reluctant, we can try those therapeutic fibs. This is where we say it's okay to lie. We use it, we change the jargon to therapeutic fibs, so you all feel a little better about telling those white lies. But it's
I don't feel bad at all.
yes, good. It's one of the, it's a piece where we are preserving anxiety, we're preserving agitation, we're preserving some anger. So we use those instances of using therapeutic fibs. Anybody have a good example of how that's been successful for them? I think using those as examples are really great. Yeah.
Well, back when my grandmother was in the nursing home, she was still living on Maple Hill, you know. But, Mom would take her out for something and then she never wanted to go back to the nursing home. So Mom would say, well, yeah, but we're going there to visit and have coffee and Chester's gonna come and pick you up. Same lie every time. It's the nicest thing you could ever done because you got right out and wanted to go visit.
Yep, it's a great example. And to use the same one, I mean, that shows right there that unfortunately their memory loss is pretty quick, so they're not going to remember. I think it's unfortunate for the person obviously in the condition, but it's a little bit of a tool that caregivers and families can use too. I always say to caution folks that, especially with the early stages, because sometimes they can still remember some things, and they might have better memory recall than someone into the middle or later stages. So if you're using these therapeutic fibs or these tools in communication, to just kind of know that it could potentially backfire in the beginning, and learn from that and move forward, but it will change as the disease progresses too. So some of those communication tips, and again, some of these tips are maybe not going to work in some of the stages that we talk about. So. Well, that's a little bit about the doctor's visits, but are there questions about that or comments or anything before we jump into the driving part of things? All right. Okay, so driving. This is probably my least favorite thing to talk with families. I'm sure it's probably one of your least favorite things to talk because this is such a really part of independence for someone. So I think we need to first think about what driving means. It's not necessarily just the actual action of driving. It's the sense of comfort. It's the sense of normalcy for someone, that their world is changing and this has been a stability for them for probably many, 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 many years. And it's their independence. So these are huge pieces to think about, that if we start a conversation by saying, you got a dent in the car, you're done. After the first dent, how do you think that's going to go? Yeah, probably very poorly, right? So it's those things to think about as we're talking about it. And I can't stress this one enough. This is probably the one that with financial and legal planning, but this is the one to really have those early conversations on while that person is still driving, while that person still has that capability to make those decisions themselves, to understand the concern we might have for these conversations for them driving in the future. So I think this one is really important to think about. If you're starting to see accidents already happening, scrapes on the car, people getting more traffic tickets, we often encourage law enforcement to give those tickets. So there is sometimes the law enforcement will say, I'm not going to give a 1 because they're older, and they'll start to name all these excuses that they don't want to give them a ticket. And we strongly encourage them to do that because that's the trail showing that there's some changes happening and there's some safety concerns happening. So we're always kind of strongly encouraging that, and perhaps family will start to see that more too if they're not already riding in the car or seeing some of these physical things that are happening. Or if we're in the car and we're starting to see the mistakes while driving. So those are some of the bigger pieces that we might see as someone's driving. So Chris is going to talk a little bit about his situation.
There's no exact answer on this is when you stop driving. You could tell when coming up to an intersection, as an example, the ability to understand what's going on around you was starting to deteriorate a little bit. being on the highway with cars on both sides becomes a little bit more difficult. And first and foremost, the safety of everybody in the car as well as other drivers on the road. You think about that, and you want to make sure you're not putting anybody in danger. But then the difficult part is telling your dad, who you love, and you know he loves driving, and he's used to it, that he can no longer do that. But then even then, taking the keys away full time was very difficult. The doctor was very helpful in just saying, medically, you can't do this anymore. But my mother had the hardest time with this because she knew how much this was going to hurt him as well. And this is one of the first things that we had to deal with as a family when it came to telling my dad that he had to stop doing something because of this disease. That meant a lot to him.
Sure, that kind of hits home for many in that same situation. So again, proactive, planning ahead before an accident occurs. What does that look like for them? Those are those minor dents, those changes in driving, things like that. Again, I encourage you to grab this sheet that's over there after we're done today, because this goes over a lot of the things that are also in your slides, but just talking about that conversation in general and just that early planning. If you are a fan of going onto websites to learn and kind of digging around on the internet, our website, alz.org, has a really great driving and safety section, and it's all focused on driving safety. So you're welcome to take a look at that. There's multiple videos around families having that conversation and how they've had that conversation, and different tools. Different areas have different alternative resources for transportation and things. I know being in rural counties, this isn't always the case that we have all of those transportation opportunities, but just something to be planful ahead, and we'll kind of talk about what plans could potentially include. So certainly including, again, this is the time to be having those honest and frank conversations early on about the concern of driving. One of the things that during care consultation or during family meetings or during support groups, when this comes up in the support group, a lot of times people will say, I just don't know if it's the time to take the keys yet, or I don't know if they're still safe to drive. And one question that is often thrown back by some of our facilitators and other group members is, so would you be willing to put your grandchild in that car with them by themselves and have them drive them somewhere? It's one thing to say you're willing to go with them as an adult that's used to their driving, that's maybe helping them, right? That might be whispering in their ear, you need to turn left here, you need, oh, stop. I don't know if you do that with your partners. I do that with my husband a lot if he's a daydreaming, and I'll say, stop. So as partners and those used to driving together, we kind of just naturally do that. But if you had a young grandchild, would they know to do that? And would you feel comfortable doing that? And that seems to resonate with that emotional piece of, this is the time. Dementia is unpredictable. We don't know that even if they are good to drive today, that, or even this moment, that they're safe to drive home from where we are. It's so unpredictable in terms of what is going to happen in their judgment. So it's one of those things to really express those concerns about if those concerns are there. Again, appealing to the person's sense of responsibility. There's been times where I know spouses have tried to say, if this is someone who has been very, what's a good word, frugal, or cared about their money, very thrifty with their money. Sometimes they'll say, we don't use this car that often. We could sell one of these vehicles and save some money, or we don't need this car insurance. It's really expensive right now, and financially we could use that money out every month. So then they start to use those kind of financial pieces to help with that conversation of retirement from driving. So just thinking about the sense of responsibility, thinking about that person and what's important to them and their values, and using those more logistical terminology. Now, again, if someone is later or in those mid stages, using logic and using a sense of responsibility may not work. We may be past that point of having those early conversations. We may also be past the point that is what's attached onto this driving piece is what's called a driving contract. And some families have used this and found it helpful just in the conversation. It doesn't have to be it's not a formal legal document, I will say that right now. It is not anything of a formality, but it's just something to put together. It's just saying that I, the person living with dementia or Alzheimer's disease, and I'm aware that it will affect my driving, and you can all read this, but I understand that I might forget. I want to know when I'm going to be a safety concern for others. Sometimes having this written out when they are in those early stages and conversations and keeping it for when they go back or progress into those middle stages is helpful to have and say, see, we've talked about this. They may still deny it, and they may still say you signed it for me. But it can also be helpful to say, we talked about this, and these are the concerns that you expressed, and these are the concerns that we expressed as a family. Sometimes it can help, and sometimes it may not work in that moment. And then, like with everything in dementia, you may try the next day and it might work. So that's one thing too to just think about is, as any of these tips and strategies may not work one day, 1 minute, but may work next day, next minute. So just thinking about keeping things as tools. I think Sheila also talks a little bit about the driving piece.
Some tips on having the conversation is pointing out, especially for my father, the potential danger to others that it may cause if he's behind the wheel. And just talking about it from the standpoint that this is not only the best thing for you, but this is also the best thing for others around you. And these are some of the alternatives, making sure that this is what's going to happen, having a plan. If mom can't take you, then Uncle Thomas or will be here to take you, and we will make sure that you're getting out of the house and that you're doing some things. So, presenting the bad news, but then also presenting the plan. And for my father, that's really, really important to have a plan.
And that plan can be really helpful in creating the next steps, because part of that driving was the independence piece. I want to be able to still do this, I want to be able to still do that, and this. And so if there's something that's really important to them, they have a lunch that they do every week with their friends, then still make that a priority for them by trying to find someone from their group maybe that can pick them up along the way, or that you can have someone else in that care team. And this is why it's really important to also have that conversation early on about who's a part of that care team, whether it be someone from the family, if there's no family available, someone from a volunteer organization in the community. Let's have those conversations early about setting up that plan. And then I think Chris had mentioned it, that his dad's doctor was extremely helpful. I get feedback one way or the other. Sometimes doctors will not, fill out the information that or write a letter saying they shouldn't be driving, and some doctors are very much for that. So I don't know if there's one way or the other that doctors feel. I think it's their own personal choice of what they decide to do for that patient and that family. But if you do have someone that you can incorporate a professional. I know in Duluth, there is one person that does, I don't know if anybody's had a driving assessment down in the Duluth area or has known someone that's done that. We work with.
My mother-in-law did.
Yeah, there's an
Fabulous.
Yeah, so occupational therapist at St. Luke's, and then Essentia also does. But I know I work quite often with the St. Luke's occupational therapist, and one of the first things she does is not behind the wheel. It's just a conversation, and I'm not sure if that's where they went through, but just a conversation with the individual with dementia, with their family who has the concerns about what those concerns are. Her goal is not to take away the license. Her goal is to make it a safe environment for them and everybody else. So there might be early on just some restrictions that she talks about. She's very versed in dementia though, and understands the progression of the disease. But she also takes a look at their car. So remember those scratches and dings and things like that? That's what she's looking for. And one of the first things she does in her first conversations with them is she's up on a floor that overlooks the parking lot. And she'll say, which one is your car? And if they have troubles pointing out even where their car is, she's gathering information by just, simply asking some questions that might be very familiar to them. So, and she's taking a look at that car. She then does do a behind the wheel driving with them at times if that first part of it, if it seems like they're still safe driving and everything. So again, this conversation is going to change when we have someone in the middle or potentially in the later stages who may still think they have a driver's license. So even if their driver's license may have been suspended, revoked, expired, they still think they have a driver's license. They may not remember that. So it's beyond taking that driver's license away. It's also thinking about the keys and the actual vehicle and for those safety pieces. So that's just something to think about as someone, so I know a care partner recently said, well, he's not going to drive anymore because his license expired. He had a birthday and it expired and we never went in to get it renewed. And so he can't drive. He doesn't have a valid driver's license. Well, does he know he doesn't have a valid driver's license? He may not, and he may not remember that. So it's, again, takes it beyond knowing kind of where they are in those stages to think about that conversation and what that might look like. I'm just going to jump through this one real quick. So we talked a little bit about maximizing independence and when to stop driving, that it really is focused on having those options available, having those choices available, especially early on, really important to have those choices available, and the importance of planning. All of this comes into play with legal and financial planning as well.
Financially, this disease will increase the cost of living. It's just a fact. So planning for those extra costs is that much more important than what you were planning for before. And so you have to review everything that's in place, see what changes need to be made, both legally and financially, and you have to monitor that going forward afterwards too.
So this can feel very intrusive to talk to someone about their legal and financial. I know when we had this conversation in our family, I felt, I was comfortable enough doing the work that I do to bring it to my parents, but it also felt very intrusive to ask about it, even though eventually it was all going to fall down to my brother and I. I knew this because I think we grew up, myself grew up in a culture of just the finances were them to keep for our family, and we didn't really have to question it because that was for them. And even with my own family now, I don't talk finances with my children. We talk about being financially responsible, but we don't tell them how much is in our bank account, what our retirement. So it can be feeling very intrusive, right? To have these conversations and very uncomfortable. And for some, it could be a sign of disrespect to even start to question some of this. So just to think about those, how can we put those feelings aside for ourselves to have these really important conversations early on? I'm going to jump through this. Well, I'll let this one play.
Here's what I've come to after all of this. That it's the most loving and kind thing you can do for them is to be honest with them and say, this is like a really scary thing. And I feel a lot of discomfort bringing this up to you, but you know, I tell them, if you're going to be the one who's going to take them on this journey, then you have to tell them, I'm going to be here on this journey with you. And there are things that we have to do to get this in place. We're going to go on this journey together. I've told you I'm going to be here with you till the end. So let's get this ready. It's like we're going to go on an ocean ship. We've got to get things packed up. We've got to figure out what we're taking with us. We got to get ready. And the things that we have to get ready, we have to make sure that we know which doctors you're going to be using. I need to get this signed, okay? So that if you go in there and they have to do surgery, for example, I got to have this durable power of attorney for healthcare for you. I have to have this worked out, okay? Now, if for some reason, okay, you need to go to rehab after something, I have to have these documents here, the financial stuff, so I can get these things taken care of for you while this is going on. I don't want to have anything get in the way of us being able to progress and keep doing this. I said, it seems hard because it's hard in our heads. You know, everybody's read about people who've stolen from elderly people, who've done these horrible things. But if you're the person who's approaching this with loving kindness and compassion, and you're willing to take this person on this journey, you're not doing a bad thing. You're doing the right thing by talking to them about it. And you approach it from the standpoint of, I'm here for you. I'm doing this for you. We're going to do this together, and I'm going to help you through this. And these are the tools that I need to make sure that we can do this.
And again, I think this is a topic where dementia doesn't even need to come into play. This is aging, right? So this is as we age, we need to know what our plans are, what we want for our plans financially, legally, and we have a responsibility to share that with the people that are going to be taking this on as we pass. So that's a little bit about, this conversation. I think a lot of families start thinking about it right when someone's been diagnosed, when really probably should have been thought about, many years before that, and perhaps changed during the time of diagnosis. Maybe there's some legal planning that's changed during that time, but this is really something to start. There's no wrong time to start this conversation. Really important. Some people will say, I'm not sure where to start. And so if you all have experiences as you help, please share them. I feel like the two great places to start are to figure out your power of attorney. So your power of attorney for healthcare and financial. We want to make sure that whatever financial pieces are taken care of by your power of attorney, they can make those decisions at the banks, they can make those payments, things like that, and your healthcare decisions. So a lot of you, I know physicians and providers ask now, do you have your healthcare directives? Hopefully you all have a healthcare directive. Very simple in Minnesota. There's common forms to use for that. So you can certainly get that through your clinic. But really important to have those healthcare directives, because that allows you to make decisions for yourself. And it also takes away that burden from your family. So start by just gathering those questions. If you have more involved questions around financial and legal, elder law attorneys, a great topic would have been Kristen Ferendo. If you haven't had Kristen come talk yet from Legal Aid, she does a really great job with power of attorney and just all of those legal and financial things to think about around Medicare and Medicaid and everything like that. So I'd start attending classes around that, start doing some research. County workers can be really helpful if you're planning to apply for Medicaid. They can help with that process and what that might be like. So just start those conversations early so you know you're not going to hit a crisis moment in that planning process. Break those conversations apart. So we don't need to do the power of attorney and the healthcare directive in one conversation. They're heavy things. So let's focus on one or the other and then kind of bring them all together. So just start by breaking it down for people. And again, involving others as needed, from care teams, from your family, from other experiences. I know we actually, when we had our conversation with our parents, we brought in some financial planners that my brother was working with through his business because he's self-employed. And so we had some other opportunities to bring in some other experts in the field to kind of just share what they thought the process should be looking like. So if you have the opportunity to bring in others, whether that be from your informal or formal care team, do that. And speaking of care team, every care team is different. And so just really think about involving the entire team. This could be different for every individual. So we're usually talking family in the beginning. That could be blood family, that could be also family of choice. So we make sure that that person's family of choice or someone that might be not biologically rated, but very important to them as a part of that conversation and as a care team. We're talking about the medical team, right? So we have our providers, our nurses, any mental health providers that we might have be a part of that process. If anybody's living within a care facility, that we include them into that process of conversation as well. A lot of our caregivers get support through their peers, through our support groups. I think the #1 spot, and I encourage people who are caregiving to join a support group because you'll get the most information from your peers. And that's why I say I encourage you to share your information. The experts know what they're talking about, and they know what they're doing, but the peers have been through the process on the other side. And just to hear that process can be so valuable. And we talk about workplace. If you're still working as a caregiver, talk to your employer about FMLA, your leave. Talk to your employer about any benefits that may have to caregivers, any leave time benefits. There's a lot of workplace benefits available to people now that a lot of folks aren't aware of. So think about talking to your HR if you are in a situation that you are caring for someone. And of course, our very favorite community resources. So Christy mentioned Care Partners of Cook County. I know we've got some county folks here today. Kelsey's got great resources here that she works with. There's a lot of great places. And what I love about rural Minnesota, and I get to work all in northern Minnesota, so I get a lot of rural counties, is that the community takes care of each other and that the community really pulls together when families are in need. So I love that, and I feel like this is a really great opportunity to utilize those community resources and utilize those teams. And then you're always welcome to reach out to us at the Alzheimer's Association. I did bring some of our resources over at the table. I'll talk a little bit about them quickly. Our website, alz.org. One of our newly updated is our Alzheimer's Navigator. If you've not used it, it's a really great tool where you can actually go in, and if you want to do some legal and financial planning, you can actually pull the legal and financial tab, and it will ask you a series of questions directed to your current situation, and it will actually put together a quick care plan for you with links to other resources available to you. Potentially, it will also link you to some of our classes too. So we have some opportunities for classes that you learn. And All's Connected is if you are wanting to attend or be a part of an online forum. So it's kind of like a support group, but online. It's just a forum. You can just write in your questions, your topics. I'm struggling with this. How did someone do this? Or how are you dealing with getting someone into the bath? Things like that. And then there's others that can answer that question for you. We have a caregiver center. We have a safety center. I brought our safety brochure for things to think about, not only with driving and medication safety, but firearm safety. We live in northern Minnesota. There's a lot of hunters in our area. So thinking about firearm safety, thinking about home safety, all of that good stuff is in there. I brought that with me. We have quite a few support groups, both in person, and we do have some virtual groups as well. So you're welcome to connect with me. And then all of our education programs, including this one, are available online all the time through training.alz.org. And then I think by far our best resource is our 24/7 helpline. So it is available 365 days a year, never shuts down. If you would like to talk to someone, they are there. We also have mastered level clinicians who do care consultations online. I will say if you do call them, perhaps a care consultant might be with other families, so you may be given a call back. So it may not be instantaneous if you're looking for a care consultation, but we do have helpline agents available 24/7. If you haven't been to our website, it is very expansive and has everything and anything you could possibly want to know, from research to new treatments that are out, all the good stuff that's on there. So feel free to peruse that if you'd like. But I will stop there so I have 5 minutes. It's better than I did last time. So if there's questions or concerns, happy to take them. I will stick around a little bit afterwards too. And if there's anything that people need, grab resources. Thanks to Kelsey and Christy and Care Partners for this opportunity. And thanks to all of you.
And thank you, Jenna.